Programming Throwdown, episode 119, The Art of Vacations. Take it away, Patrick.
Well, hopefully all you listeners aren't going to be thinking you need a vacation after listening to this episode. No, I'm just kidding.
Wait, let's just really quick. I want to talk about just like how important this episode is. Like people might see this title and think, wow, Patrick and Jason, they've run out of programming languages or something. But no, this is super, super important. We preempted all of our other show ideas to talk about this, especially with COVID and everything. So stay tuned. You're going to learn a lot of good stuff.
I think a lot of people when we're recording this now, we're at like 18-ish months, 17 months of, kind of like work from home, COVID, all this stuff. I think people are really burning out. Like the people I work with, the people like I talk to, I try to encourage them, like take time off. Even if you are just going to stay at home still, like just get away from your computer. People have gone so long without taking vacations or going anywhere. And even if you're worried about health stuff or whatever, we'll talk about it. I don't want to spoil all of the stuff.
But stay tuned. It's really important.
Yes, thank you. Don't change the channel. We're showing our age. The intro topic for this episode, I wanted to talk about how cool it is. It's been a somewhat recurring topic on the show, talking about space technology and going to space, and we've covered various topics over the years. That feels weird to say. And I want to say, since our last sort of duo episode, there's been a bunch of really cool news. And I'm not even going to really talk about any of the sort of SpaceX related news. That's highly covered by other people. That's super exciting. But just not SpaceX related space news, there's been a lot of cool stuff happen. So Virgin Galactic and had Richard Branson go to, I guess now we have to put air quotes, space in air quotes. There's a whole feud over that. But I mean, regardless, the fact that they got to where they've been headed for years.
Well, wait, real quick. Was he weightless? Because that's how
Yes.
I define space. Okay, that counts as space to me. I mean, I'm not an expert, but.
So there's a difference between the US and other countries about where the launch. So this wasn't intuitive to me. I was explaining it to someone and it's kind of weird, but Earth's atmosphere, and I'm going to get it wrong, but Earth's atmosphere doesn't just stop at some point, right? It's like a gradient. And it's dense by the surface. And then as you go higher and higher and higher, it gets less and less and less dense, right? But where do you put the cutoff point? Because it's kind of like a probability thing, or a density. So the density of atmosphere goes lower and lower, but it doesn't just stop at some point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you have to sort of arbitrarily kind of define a line where it's mostly you're out of the atmosphere. But even when you're sort of in orbit and clearly what most people call space, you're still experiencing drag and effects of the atmosphere. And low Earth orbit satellites still experience actually quite a bit of drag. It's a pretty big problem for them to overcome. But going weightless is one way to do it. But you can go weightless in the, what do they call it? The Vomit Comet, the jet passenger plane. They stripped all the seats out, and then it goes in a parabolic set of sinusoidal up and downs. And you can go weightless in that. But you can see the curve of Earth from where they went. It's by some definition space. And then shortly after, in somewhat of a, we can call it a race, Jeff Bezos went on the Blue Origin rocket to the space, to the edge of space, whatever you want to call it. There was even a kerfluffle about who should or shouldn't be considered astronauts. So that all got changed as well. But I think both of those are really cool. There's a separate Virgin company from Virgin Galactic, which is focused on basically space tourism. There's a separate one, Virgin Orbit, which has the ability to actually go into an orbit and put small satellites into orbit. And so they also had another, I think it was their second time, where they were deployed a bunch of these small satellites into orbit. And it's a similar approach. They take a sort of airplane up, and then they have a sort of rocket underneath it, but they launch it from a much higher altitude because most of your fuel is spent getting up into speed and through the thickest parts of the atmosphere. And so sort of these three things, just excluding all of the normal NASA stuff and SpaceX stuff, are incredibly exciting for me, at least. I don't know, I always felt this was going to happen. Space tourism. If you were, I guess you still have to be a billionaire, but now it's on a trajectory where it'll come down in price over time. I have no idea how low it'll go, but the amount and repeatability of people going to space is going to become much more common and everyday.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think so. The idea is you have an airplane that's carrying a rocket, and the airplane can kind of go can climb slowly because it's going at this like really flat angle, and then at some point the rocket takes off. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's the Virgin approach. That's not how the Blue Origin Jeff Bezos one does, but that's how the Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic work. Yes.
Yeah, that seems cheaper on its face. Like it seems like maybe that might become they might be able to get the cost down,
You can also
but we'll see.
reuse the airplane that launched. I mean, there's a bunch of. I guess it's a big design space, and there's many ways to tackle the problems and lots of trade offs. But it's cool to see different private companies doing it with humans on board, to see the ability to iterate and explore the design space, because not everyone's doing it exactly the same. Everyone has a slightly different approach, which means we'll be able to learn much faster.
Yeah, it seems like this is really where when I think about engineering sort of hitting mainstream, right? This is one of those places where like everyone's hearing about these rockets. Like not everyone can watch Programming Throwdown, although they should. But not everyone's listening to Programming Throwdown. But everyone can, especially like children can see this like this new space race and get really excited about engineering and tech and all of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you can observe that it's very likely that the various space launches, even leaving the politics of it aside, but between the sort of Soviet Union, the United States, and going to space, and both the funding that went into it, probably a big contributor, but even just the like press and coverage on the news that got. You're right, Jason. I think like it's fundamental for people to see like a very visual representation of what a sometimes more abstract, engineering career can be about.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's super cool. I think so. I think I asked you this before, but I don't remember the answer. It's like, when can we go to space for under, let's say, like $20,000? Is that does that look anywhere on the horizon?
I don't know. I don't remember. I believe it said, I've not gone to their website and tried to buy one myself, but I think Virgin Galactic's flights are like, I think around like 100,000 is
Oh,
like
that's
the
not
trade. Like
far
they're
off.
selling tickets. I don't. I'd have to look it up. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that's right about where they're saying. And of course, like for that, it's like a luxury thing. Like he built this big. If you haven't seen it, you should check out like this big space base, and you can go, astronaut training, and they put you through some sort of like practice stuff, so you kind of know what to expect. There's a whole like luxury lounge where like your family can wait while you do your flight or whatever. Right? It's a whole like a luxury vacation almost in the middle of the desert that culminates with you sort of going to space.
Wow, wow. So it's definitely getting there.
Yeah, so 100,000 down to 20,000 seems like we're on. There's a path where you can see that. The question that I have and people are debating is if this becomes cheaper and cheaper and stronger and better rockets, then like what does it mean for point to point travel, like going from San Francisco to New York City, or going from China to Europe? And can you put passengers on a rocket, fly them up, and land them back on the other side in sort of like astonishingly small amounts of time? Can that ever become safe enough? And can it become cheap enough for it to be like a alternative to plane travel?
Wow, that would be wild. Yeah, can you imagine? That would be totally wild. It's like you take a family with your flight, and at some point everyone's weightless, so you have to like strap in, and then you get back down to earth. That'd be wild.
It's like every science fiction book ever. Yes.
Yeah, it's true. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to So, how do you follow this stuff? Do you subscribe to a bunch of space blogs, or is it?
There are some good YouTube channels. So there's if you sort of go on YouTube, there's a community building, especially with SpaceX doing like so much out in the open and iteration. Like I think it's built up a lot of interest in this, so it's helped to kind of create enough money in that area to have some sort of full-time coverage on YouTube. So you can go check it out. I don't want to pitch any specific people because then I'll forget others and people will mock me for it. But I guess like that's probably how I keep up to date on most of it.
Yeah, yeah, same here. Like, I mean, not with space, but the way I catch up on current events is mostly through my YouTube subscriptions, which is a really odd way if you think about it to get the news. And so yeah, it's that is really interesting. I used to use Flipboard, but yeah, I think what happened is I think like it's like a recommender. It's an AI fail actually. Flipboard, I don't remember exactly. Oh yeah, here's what happened. So, I was looking up some articles about COVID, way back, like more than a year ago. And then, being AI and recommender systems, it just started inundating me with like all these things about COVID and all these people are getting sick and everything. And so it ruined the experience. And so I just stopped using the app. And so, yeah, really, now it's like there's not really any place I go to for news other than I just follow some YouTube folks.
I have this thing too, yeah. Like sometimes I'll see an article that is evocative and I will not click it because it's like if I click this, I'm gonna get inundated with, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
COVID conspiracy or celebrity news or whatever. You see something and every time you're like, I'm bored. No, I'm not gonna click it.
Yeah. You'll pay for it later, right? Oh, man. All right. On to news. My news is first news is TextStyleBrush, which is the title is Transfer of Text Aesthetics from a Single Example. So this is a summary of a research paper. I couldn't find any implementation of it on GitHub yet, although I'm sure it'll happen. But it's so cool. Basically, you can take a picture that has some text on it, and you can rewrite the text. So if even if it's handwritten, it doesn't matter. So imagine like you take a picture of a billboard somewhere, and you could actually just change the text and make the billboard say whatever you want. And it handles like just from that one image, it will learn the style of the font, and it will guess what the letters that it doesn't have access to would look like. And then it also figures out the pose of the text. And then you can, magic erase that text and then replace it with something else. And I thought that was remarkable. It uses some technology called GANs, which is short for generative adversarial networks. And so basically, not to get too much in the weeds here, but the way it works is you can imagine like if you have the font, right? So imagine like you have the font for something, and you go and type a bunch of letters into a Google Doc or something like that, and you take a picture of it. You could now you have a let's say you have all the letters A through Z, and you know what they look like. You could give half of them to a model, a machine learning model, and then ask it to draw the other half. And you know the answer, so you could tell it whether it's doing a good job or not. And so this is called self-supervision. It's when, you know the answer, but the identity of this data is the answer. So, if you hide the letter A and you ask the computer to regenerate it, you know exactly what the answer is, but it's not because you had a person go and label it and say this is an A, this is a B. It's because you have a generator that can create all of these things and all these different orientations, right? So self-supervision is becoming like really, really hot right now. It's a really interesting area. It's also called contrastive learning. So imagine you have a picture and you delete, a section of the picture and ask the computer to regenerate it. And again, you have the exact answer. You don't have to have a person go in and label it. But it's still like a challenge for the computer to try and guess like what would have been there. Now imagine you have a picture of a house and you delete all the pixels of the windows, right? You're going to have these like really square shaped gaps right where windows should be. And even just as a human, you can look at that and say, oh, yeah, there's probably a window there, right? And so you're basically training the AI to do that. And because you've subtracted the answer, you have the answer. You don't have to pay a human to go and label that, right? So, anyways, kind of spiraling back up. So, all of this technology has culminated in a number of different advances, but one of them is this. And I think this is going to make some really, really funny pictures. I mean, the fact that you can just rewrite anything, I think you can have some really funny parodies come out of this. And maybe that's why there's no open source. People are afraid to make this and then unleash Pandora's box. But I thought it was a really, really interesting research paper. It covers it in really good detail, and you also check it out.
It seems like, and I don't know exactly. Like we covered, what was it called? GPT. The
Yeah.
we covered like a variety of these topics. I feel I'm starting to see like a lot more kind of like applications like plug and play, not necessarily advancing state of the art alone. I mean, although that is also happening, a lot more of like people doing sort of very uh, human level things, like very visceral things like you're describing with the technology of AI, rather than just like a research paper or just some some statistics or whatever, but actually kind of doing stuff that humans can sort of interact with and relate to. I feel like there's like a groundswell going on there. I don't know where it'll go or where it'll lead. I'm sure you have sort of thoughts on that, but it definitely seems like some corner got turned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, the challenge for AI in the mainstream has been data and compute, right? So, like, if you look at Google, Google has so much data and so many computers that they can do things like they can detect, let's say, dogs in an image, and they could do it really accurately. For you to do that, you would need to have a person go in and say, this picture has a dog, this picture doesn't have a dog. And you'd have to do that millions of times, and you have to pay that person. And so, just to make, if you didn't have any data, you had to create all the data sets yourself. But even like imagine taking photos of millions of dogs, right? Like you're talking about, like it would take you hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a dog detector if you had to, curate the data. And so that has held most people back. I mean, the big companies are obviously doing it. They have the millions of dollars, but for most small and medium businesses, it's just not an option, right? And so, but then, yeah, if you look at people, right, like you could, with some very simple training, you could start to recognize different breeds of dogs. Like maybe you do already. I mean, I personally know nothing about dogs, but I feel like if I was to spend a few days, I could learn like the most common breeds, and I could start telling dogs apart, right? So as people, we could do it. And so the question is, how do we build that sort of base of intelligence where then someone doesn't need to spend so much money to do something? And so self-supervised learning seems to be the answer to that question. I mean, the jury is still out, but that's where it's kind of leaning towards, which is super exciting because it's going to open a whole bunch of opportunities. And so, yeah, it turns out that playing this game of, like, guessing the missing thing ends up building a foundation, and then on top of that, you can do other AI things, without needing so much data. And so you're gonna see more and more of this where there'll be some enormous machine learning model that Google has trained on all of their images, and you can start with that and then do your task on top of it. I think that it's called transfer learning. I think that is it's really starting to take off now.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. I mean, the whole appeal of deep learning was that the whole premise of deep learning was that transfer learning doesn't work, right? People used to do SVD, like singular value decomposition, right? Or PCA or one of these things. So they would take an image and they would crush it down to like 30 numbers, right? And then they would do machine learning on the 30 numbers. And actually, Patrick, we did this when we
Yep.
were,
Yep. I was just gonna say I remember doing this with you.
yeah, I mean, we actually built these things that would take images and crush them down to like either smaller images or or sets of numbers, and then we would do machine learning in that small space. And then deep learning killed all of that because it was just so much better, and it could just go from raw pixels to the answer without this in between layer that is doing something that's not aware of the problem, right? And so now you're going back to that, where now you're going back to like, yeah, Google gives you this model that they trained using self supervision, not knowing anything about your task. The real difference is now you can update the model. So like imagine if you started with doing SVD, but then if the problem, like if two images are very similar, but they're actually different labels, like one's a dog and one's a cat, but they're just similar, the SVD will put them in the same space, but then your problem will pull them apart again. And so as long as your problem can kind of modify the SVD, you're good. That's a nice thing about doing the dimensionality reduction with neural nets, is that you can always change the way that they're reducing later as you introduce like a real problem. And so that's the gamble. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, is that so? So, idea there is that somehow, like when Google trains this model on everything, right? It doesn't end up recording everything, but it builds some. The words are going to get picky, I guess, but it builds some understanding about how to tell what is or isn't in a picture, and like tell pictures apart and like structure of images. So then, when you go to train it with a much smaller data set custom to yours, like you're only sort of changing how it interprets that structural understanding of the images.
Yeah, pretty much. And the other thing is there's an assumption here that, for example, symmetry is important. And so almost any image processing thing you're going to train is going to take advantage of that, right? So imagine, for example, like here's a really sort of counter example is if you had just random noise and the goal was to predict like the number of white pixels. Like so you have a random binary image that's just generated with random numbers and you want to predict how many pixels are white. That is going to be really really hard to transfer learn, right? Because there's no symmetry, there's nothing real there. And so it's going to be worse actually than if you had just trained it from scratch, right? But that is like people don't do that, right? Like that's not useful. And so when you look at like the class of useful things you can do with computer vision, almost all of them have like need those same building blocks.
Uh,
And so that's why it becomes useful.
Man, I think we should definitely have some more episodes to hear you talk about this. This is actually very interesting.
Actually, yeah. So, spoiler alert, we have a guest who's an expert on exactly this, on embeddings and transfer learning, who I'm trying to schedule. So we are going to spend a whole episode on it. So, hopefully, actually, it's not confirmed yet. I'm still trying to get them on the show, but yeah, that's coming up. So, stay tuned.
I know something about embedded software, but I'm pretty sure that's not what you mean by embedded. But speaking of embedded software, I'll segue into my next topic, which has to do with integer overflows. So, a little bit of a setup. There's a guy named Warren Buffett, who's like pretty famous investor. He runs a company called Berkshire Hathaway, and they do a variety of things. They actually own a lot of like household names. So let's see, like I think they own like Geico Insurance. They own like Hellsberg Diamonds.
Oh, I didn't know they owned anything. I thought they just bought their own stocks or something.
So they do a little bit of everything. So they do own some companies and continue to run them. I think See's Candy as well.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
there's like a variety. You can go. There's a list somewhere of all the like Berkshire Hathaway companies where they sort of find companies. They sort of help them, replace the management, and then they have like oh gosh, a synergy between the companies. Like one might throw out a lot of extra cash. One you may need a lot of cash on hand, like in an insurance case, in case you have to do payouts. So there's like reasons to have some of these companies together, which is one of the things he sort of like, I don't know, it's like pioneered, like got right. But they also do temporarily like buy parts of Apple and then sell it back without taking a controlling interest. And there he has, so there's a thing when your stock price starts to get really high, it becomes really hard for people to buy a share. Recently, a lot of stock brokerages have allowed you to buy fractional shares, which we won't talk about, like how that implies, like with voting rights, it gets into a whole thing. But you can now buy fractional shares, but you didn't used to be able to buy a part of a share. So as companies' stock price rose, it became so expensive that for an individual retail customer, they couldn't buy shares. Or if they wanted to buy, like, I want to buy $1,000, but your stock is 750, there's like this $250 left over you would have bought of the company that you can't. So a lot of companies do stock splits to reduce their stock price and bring it down lower. And there's a variety of reasons why that may or may not be a good idea. But Warren Buffett has like very famously said he doesn't want to split his stock. He's not going to split his stock. There is actually two classes of stock, Berkshire A and Berkshire B. Berkshire Hathaway B actually trades at a lower price because it takes multiple of those shares to equal one of the Berkshire A shares. But Berkshire A has famously never split, but it's continued to be a very successful company for many decades. And it turns out that some of the exchanges, in this case, Berkshire Hathaway stock is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and they didn't have this issue. But NASDAQ Stock Exchange publishes feeds of data that people use for instance, like the Yahoo or Google Finance. When you go there and you look up a stock price, they use the NASDAQ feed of prices. in order to show it to you, even for things which aren't listed on NASDAQ. That's a whole other topic. And what happened is Berkshire Hathaway stock got to a price where they had to actually delist it for a while, some of the things that they were listing. And the reason why is not that the stock price reached what is it? So they were storing it as a 32-bit value in this NASDAQ feed to keep it nice and compact. You don't normally use floats or doubles when you're doing finance stuff because you can get sort of, well, what's a whole other topic, but how you get numerical stability, you get sort of not exact representations of some fractions. So instead, what they do is they use you call it like a fixed point thing. They represent hundredths of cents in 32 bits. So you have only, 4.3 billion? So the stock price did not reach 4.3 billion per share, but it did reach $435,000, which if you represent times hundredths of a penny would be what? Times 10 times 100 times 100, so times 10,000.
Yep.
Equals really close to 4.3 billion. So they had to preemptively delist the stock from, I guess it was like the price of the last sale and a couple of the other kinds of feeds that they have, not the daily closing, which is what kind of most people see, but this sort of intraday, like what is the last price that the stock has been exchanged at. They had to delist it from there because what would have happened is once it reached the 32-bit representational max is it would have wrapped around and it would have looked like the stock price was trading for fractions of a penny. And so that
Which would have been awesome.
that would have been a really good deal.
Bye.
There was some pressure given, which I don't know how you apply pressure to a very, very rich person like that, but they kind of asked Warren Buffett, like, hey, could you just split it? Like maybe, but he wouldn't. So what they ended up having to do is preemptively delist from some of these feeds. So I actually was like, there are some crazy pictures that you can find on the internet of like the Google stock ticker or like the Yahoo one where it like kind of glitches out when it started hovering around that price. And even today, I assume it's still related. If you go to Google and you search for Berkshire A, BRK.A, which is the one we've been talking about, the sort of intraday trade price is just blank. It won't show it to you. So if you click on like the month view or the year view where it's showing only the price at the end of the day, you can see that. But the graph for like what's happening within a day is just blank. Presumably because it's still not available because they're at such a high price.
Wow, that is wild. It's like it actually looks very similar to the Theranos stock graph, but for
Oh
different
no,
reasons.
no, it's not the same. It's not the same. If someone offers you shares of Theranos, it's probably not a good idea to buy unless you really know something that no one else does.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh man. Yeah, that is wild. So are they still in a deadlock or is somebody going to budge there? Are they going to have to recode all of their stuff?
I have no idea. Like, I don't know how you do an update to like switch a bit width from 32 bits to 64 bits. And there's like a feed that gets published and paid for by like probably I don't even like thousands, tens of thousands of different institutions. Like I
Yeah.
guess you make a V2 of it and then you make that one 64 bits and then you tell people they need to move to the V2 of the API. And that's a huge problem.
I remember when YouTube views hit 4 billion on a video and that was a massive problem. And yeah, so yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting that on one hand, it's like, yeah, maybe this person should, just let them split. But on the other hand, it's like, well, maybe they should fix their old code. I mean,
Yeah, it seems like kind of a silly reason to split. Like somebody assumed your stock price would never get this high and it did. So like, do you mind making it lower?
it's probably great coverage too.
I don't think Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway need more coverage, but yeah, potentially.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, kind of everyone wants to see it break the stock market, so they'll just buy it for that reason.
Yeah, I guess I should mention the region he doesn't want to split. I kind of left that unsaid was that he actually doesn't want the churn that comes with retail investors. So people who buy it at a
Oh
lower
yeah,
price kind of move in and out a lot more, and it gets a lot more churn. He wants people buying and sort of holding the stock and investing and letting it go up over time. So that's sort of his theory there.
that makes sense. I could see that. Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I have a whole I mean, yeah, we won't go into the segue, but the whole thing about public companies and effectively random people telling your company what to do is so strange to me, but that would take a whole hour to talk about. Um, so yeah, I'll jump into mine. It's Lineage OS. So I've gotten so many emails from folks about either the Pine phone or the I think it's called Librem phone. So many people are interested in this. Open source phones and totally free and open source software, driven phones and open hardware phones. I looked into it. I thought about maybe we'll still do a show on it, but I looked into it and I found that a lot of them are either very expensive. Like I think the Librem 5 is like $2,000 or something like that. Or it just seems like a real homebrew thing that maybe you couldn't really rely on if there was an emergency or something. And so this actually, in my opinion, seems like the way to go. I wouldn't say specifically Lineage OS. There might be a better one, but it seems like getting an existing phone and just rewriting the OS and you're relying on the quality control of the hardware manufacturer seems like a safer option, especially if it's Android and you're putting another Android, fork of Android on there. And so Lineage OS is one of these where they have a list of approved devices that they've tested, and so you can go and buy like say a Pixel 3. I don't know if Pixel 3 is on there now, but you could buy let's say a Pixel 3, and they'll show you step by step how to install this open source OS, and then you get everything now is totally open source. There's not really any surprises or anything like that, and they have their own app store and everything like that. And so this I have to really dive into this, but I know that folks who listen to the show are super interested in this, and I wanted to give my take on it based on the research I've done so far, and actually throw it back at folks out there. So if you've emailed us about PinePhone and these things, take a look at this, and then feel free to opine, and we can have a discussion on it.
Oh.
This sounds like something you've looked into, Patrick. Have you looked into any of this, like Tiny Phone or any of this?
Yeah, I have some, but it's kind of the same. I love like playing with embedded stuff, but I guess I treat it as like not reliable things. Like my phone, I'm kind of picky about. I just for various reasons, I just want a phone that I know is going to work. That I know, like, if I pick it up and call a number, it's going to like ring. If I text someone, it's going.
Yeah.
I don't know. The few times my phone doesn't work or crashes, we had this experience. Actually, we went on vacation a couple of weeks ago, and we had flown somewhere. And when we landed, neither my wife nor I's phone would work, and it was incredibly hard to call the Uber without like our phones being on specifically the LTE wouldn't work. And so we like tried like turning on airplane mode, turning it off. We eventually were able to get on like the airport Wi-Fi and like call the Uber. But then when we walked out to like meet them, like the phone stopped working and they weren't where they said they were, and we had to go back inside. It was a huge mess. And then it actually turned out to be a little embarrassing. And when we got to the hotel, we're like, "Hey, does this cell provider not work?" They're like, "No, it should work. Have you tried restarting your phone?" I'm like, "Nah, that doesn't do anything." Restarted our phone, sure enough, like it came back. And it was just like, oh,
No, really?
yes.
Wow.
And the same thing happened when we flew back here. It wouldn't work until we rebooted our phones. And it's just like that little glitch. And it just like it was miserable trying to like get that Uber and like yeah. So anyways, phones not working and like the modern it's just like we've come completely to depend on them. So no, I'm not spending a ton of time in this particular pulling of the thread.
Yeah, I might. Yeah, I agree with you. I also have the same fear of things like I guess it would have to support the Play Store, right? Because like if you couldn't, I'm sure Uber is not on this Lineage OS store. I mean, almost 100% sure. So yeah, if you can't run one of the major app stores, then it seems like that's a non-starter, or you have to carry two phones. But yeah, I think just the idea of going to open source. I mean, I don't know about you, but I run Linux at home, and so that's become just part of my daily life. So
What
so I
is
feel
what
like
is
it might
Linux?
just be a matter of time. Actually, I guess you're running at least Unix. So
Yeah, there we go. Let's that's what Windows runs on top. No, I'm just kidding.
oh my god. Actually, wait, is FreeBSD? I'm totally gonna get so much hate for this.
No, yeah, yeah. Moving to the next topic.
Yeah, let's
Uh,
just move on.
my Mine is actually a book. I guess I could use this for the book of the show. But there is a website I've been following about building your own interpreter and sort of walking through scratch. It's on my perpetual, like, I have many things like this that I want to work by a guy, Robert, I think you say his name, Nystrom. And
Yep.
he previously wrote, I think it was like game design patterns, which I felt like was a really good like approach to some design patterns under the guise of talking about it as a game because people understand games and lots of people want to build games. And I think he came from the video game industry. But he's been writing these blog posts. You can still get them for free and like the complete sort of like book in serialized form. But he decided to make an actual print book in a PDF. And the reason why is one calling out that like, hey, there's this cool resource you can check out about learning to write your own interpreters. But also like, you know, it's still in this day and age, like it's somewhat of an accomplishment to be like, I took what was blog posts and like did the proper sort of formatting and got it into a book shape and just the sort of like how in some ways, even in my head, like it kind of gets to something a blog never does, like a finality. Like he has the book, that means it's kind of like done. So even if I don't go read the book and I go read it on his website, there's some like indication that like it's been made, it's a real thing, it contains valuable information. It's just this interesting observation that one, like shout out to him, like that's super cool. And definitely go check out the material. The bits that I've gone through are very well done, and I really liked it. But just this other thing that this sort of pointing out that it's kind of interesting that it took sort of like formatting and producing the book, even though I'll probably not read the book itself, to kind of make it into this like it's done.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great way to, I think, I've seen similar patterns followed by like XKCD and other folks where they get a print book. And I think it's a great idea. Just it's a good like coffee table thing.
All right, I think it's time for book of the show.
Book of the show. My book of the show is How to Lead in Product Management. And so I'll tell you what inspired me to get this book. I a friend of mine or a colleague of mine who I was like the product manager for our team is actually really knowledgeable about engineering, has sort of like an engineering background, and it's just so easy to talk to this person. I mean, they get it. Pardon me. They get it. They understand, the challenges, and they they don't know as much about machine learning and AI as somebody an engineer on the team, but they know a lot, and it really helped them a lot. And it's also just kind of cool. It's like, oh, this person gets it. They're one of us, right? And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll do this in the other direction because I talk to a lot of product managers at work, and I probably sound like a total dummy when it comes to product to building a product or advancing a product. So I thought I would get this book and learn more about kind of that field. It's been really interesting. I think that there's something really nice about you know learning a new area because you learn a lot very quickly, right? Like you're not hit with this law of marginality, right? And yeah, I mean, just a couple of things I pulled out of the book so far is there's this idea of having sort of shared goals and how to kind of get people aligned around the same goal. It talks about, what's the difference between a vision, which is sort of like a 3-year plan, and then a milestone, which is a 6-month plan, and then a sprint, which is like a 2-week, 1 to 2 week plan, and sort of how you other than just the timeline, like what are the actual implications of having those different timelines and how do you handle them differently. One thing I thought was really interesting is it talks about, because the book is How to Lead in Product Management, it talks about like how to sort of have a coherent vision and still give autonomy to individual product managers. And so I thought that was really interesting, right? Because people think about this stereotypical Steve Jobs like throwing the phone across the room and like upset because like the font, like the letter T isn't shaped the right way. And like these are like the stories that are so outlandish that they become famous, right? But the reality is, all of these good product leaders were extremely good about creating a system of autonomy. and doing that and balancing that against their own, personal views and everything. So the book covers a lot of this stuff, and I found it fascinating. It's not a long book. It's only I think 5.5 hour listen on Audible. So if you're interested in that discipline, definitely pick it up.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I liked your observation too about like what do you want to call like cross training, like
Yeah,
learning
right.
stuff outside of your specific job description. My book is Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is part of the Book of the Ancestor trilogy, and this is the third book. We talked on the show a while ago. I actually finished this book a while ago about the first in the series, Red Sister. Then there's Gray Sister, and this is Holy Sister. And this book is about. I always struggle with this. I guess I could just read the back cover, but since it's the third book, it's spoilers if you haven't read the first book. But basically, there's it's a fantasy book with sort of a magic system, and this book does, I think pretty good. It's always hard to wrap up a series, like to finish a trilogy. People can complain, wasn't expected. You end up either leaving stuff out or not finishing it in three and going to four, five, six, and sort of getting stuck like some authors I think have sort of fallen prey to. But this trilogy is done at the third book, and it sort of comes to a conclusion. But what I liked about it is there's like a magic system that's pretty different, and there's some stuff about the world building, and it doesn't go slow. Like each book is sort of like interesting and engaging and really moves stuff forward. But then there is like kind of a slow burn, like world building. There's other stuff that you're sort of aware of, but you don't quite know that you're figuring out, and just that sort of like uh, sense of discovery that I get by reading some fiction, science fiction books specifically, or fantasy. I just really enjoy being able to like go on that sort of journey. I guess some movies can do that too, and sometimes it's like a plot twist, but I don't like ones that are just like, oh, there's this came out of right field and wasn't really hinted at, or I guess out of left field and wasn't really hinted at. I like ones where it was there if you knew where to look, right? Like there were sort of nods and hints to it all along. And if you were to rewatch it or like think back, you're like, oh, almost like, how did I miss this? Or, oh, wow, that's really cool. That's why that
Oh, that's
thing that was
great.
left unsaid, those are some of my favorite kind of experiences. And I thought this book did a good job sort of capturing that in this trilogy. And Mark Lawrence has some other series as well, but I'm not going to talk about them because they may be future book of the shows.
Nice. We were at a mall the other day, like not a mall, but a plaza, and there was a Warhammer 40K store.
Oh, really? A
And
Games Workshop store?
oh yeah, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. And there's a bunch of books, and I was there
Hmm.
with my older son, and he was checking out the books. And do you have any experience with those? Like, is like, or
The
maybe
Warhammer
like,
40K universe, like the books?
yeah, right,
Not You're
or
not
like,
talking about the game manuals. You're talking about just the fiction works.
right, right. Like, do you think that would be a good, or like maybe a better question is, what would you think would be a good book for like kids who are getting into sci-fi?
That's really interesting. So Ender's Game is like a really classic,
Oh yeah, I've read that. Yep, yep.
like first thing. But I actually think this one's a little tough. Like people, like especially kids, like you want them to be. It's not a chore. Like if you tell them to read a book, you're automatically kind of like it's not gonna it it's something they need to like maybe provide like a selection or like some guidance into like a certain you know curated set that like hey like which of these seems interesting to you. But
Ah,
I think
yeah.
like motivating kids to read until like some point is more about like having them choose stuff that they were interested in reading, because even if you're like yeah that book ended up being dumb like my kids have read some of those like wow that book was not very good, but like if they were interested they feel the sense of accomplishment of finding something they wanted to do and then doing it. And
Yeah,
so
right.
I mean, I don't know. No, I don't know anything specifically about the Warhammer 40K universe, but whether good or bad. But yeah, I mean, I think if it's something they're really into, then they're much more likely to coast through if there's like boring parts of the book or whatever. Than if you sort of like recommend a book and they get to some part and then they just like it's a chore to do the reading.
Yeah, yeah, totally makes sense. Cool. Yeah, and if you want to read any of these books, or if you want your kids to read any of these books, they could do it on Audible, or I guess listen to any of these books. I'm still actually I've gotten back into Audible, and you know, I'm not commuting anymore because of work from home. But what I've started doing is listening to audiobooks, you know, in the evening, or I've been going on walks. The nice thing is I go on a walk, and the path that I take, I actually lose cell phone reception because I go through this kind of valley that doesn't have good coverage. And the nice thing about Audible is, you know, I've downloaded the book, and so I can listen. You know, it doesn't cut out or anything like that. Versus if I do anything streaming, and I get halfway through my walk and it's just sputtering or sounding like a robot. So yeah, I've been actually getting back into Audible for that reason. And if you want to do that, you can go to audibletrial.com/programming throwdown. We'll have a link in the show notes, and that gives you a free month and also helps the show out as well. If you already have an Audible subscription and you don't need another one, you can follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/programming throwdown. And you can go on there. We have a super fast download sites. There's a special site for Patreon subscribers, who a special RSS feed for those folks. And yeah, you should check that out.
I think it's time for Tool of the Show.
My tool of the show is 7 Billion Humans, which is a video game. A lot of people have suggested over the years programming video games, you know, like video games where you write computer programs as the
Mm,
game.
human
And
resources. Yes.
wait, what was that?
Oh, sorry, that's one of those games. I think it's human resources.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So this is actually the sequel to that one.
Oh, okay. Oh, human resource machine.
Yeah, that's right. So I've played so many of them at the request of listeners, and the only one I ever liked was Human Resource Machine. Like all the other ones, I just couldn't get into. Like some of them, it's like, oh, you have to read a manual first,
Oh, it is. I
and
didn't know this. I spoiled your punch. I'm sorry.
no, no, no. And so I got to Human Resource Machine, and someone, as I said, a listener recommended it. And I was like, okay, this is simple. There's not that many instructions, but it's deceptively hard because they have these like stretch goals, like solve this in 4 instructions and stuff. And so I found it really, really engaging in a way that I didn't find the other ones. And then I somehow this one I came about on my own. I don't remember exactly how. Oh yeah, it's part of a Humble bundle. So I think the Humble bundle will be expired by the time you're listening to this, unfortunately. But I found out about this through a Humble bundle. I ended up actually not even getting the bundle because I wanted it on Android, and the bundle is for PC. So you're not missing anything there. But it's awesome. So the way the sequel works is you control like many different people with the same instructions, but you know they can branch differently depending on their environment. And so you use that trick to have a whole bunch of people do like a lot of things at the same time to accomplish some bigger goal. So like, you know, the first level is very simple. It's like have everyone take a step to the right. And so you just put in one command, step right, and all these people, there's like a whole army of people, they all just take a step to the right. And so you kind of start to understand you know, what you're doing. And then you start to see like, oh, okay, this person couldn't take a step to the right. They bumped into the wall, and now that person is now shifted relative to everybody else, and maybe you can use that to your advantage, right? So it's a really, really fun game, and I highly recommend it. I think of all the programming games, this one and its predecessor have been by far the most fun. I've tried to get my kids into it, but I think it still feels a bit too out of reach for them. It's a little bit too. It requires a bit too much up front for a 6-year-old or whatever. But actually, now my son is older, I might try again. But yeah, I highly recommend it. If you want a programming game, a game that where programming is the game, this one and the prequel are definitely the ones to start with.
Nice. I'm adding this to my list. I did like I think I got all the way to the end. I didn't do all the challenges, but of Human Resource Machine.
Yeah, actually, it's the only game I think I have 100%ed in my
Whoa,
life.
look at you.
Yeah.
All right, my game I have not 100%ed is Moss. So I actually think this was a like normal game, like a normal PC game before like a first person game, a platformer. but I'm not 100% sure. But this is I want to talk about the VR version, the virtual reality version. And I did look it up because I knew I would want to say it, and so I checked. It's available on the Oculus, which is how I played it, PC VR, and the PlayStation VR. So a variety of options
Wait,
there.
real quick, what is PC VR?
That just means like if you have like Oculus Rift
Oh, I
or
see.
is it the HTC Vive or the Valve Index, and you have it
Oh,
basically connected via like your computer is doing all of the playing and rendering, and then your headset is basically like a fancy monitor and like a gyroscope controller, right? It's feeding back. Um,
oh,
and
interesting.
so the headset itself doesn't have the game power versus like an Oculus Quest that is basically like a cell phone doing all of the rendering and stuff in your headset.
I see. So you're tethered to the computer, and I didn't even
Right.
know about this. So Steam has a VR headset?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, not Steam, a company that owns Valve, the
Oh,
Index.
Valve.
Yeah,
Okay, got it, got it.
yeah.
Okay.
But you
Cool.
can buy Steam has VR games on it and like a interface for playing the VR games. Oculus for like the Rift has like a PC app that you run that allows you to do it as well. And you can hook your Oculus Quest to your computer, or Quest 2, I guess, to your computer via like a really long USB-C cable with a whole bunch of caveats, and actually have your computer do the rendering and send it. Or now they even have it wireless where your computer can do the rendering, which could be more powerful if you could find a GPU or already bought a GPU before they became impossible and super expensive.
Yeah, that's right.
And like wirelessly stream the basically the graphics to your headset and the controls from your headset back to the computer, which allows you to play games that wouldn't be available natively or wouldn't be able to run. So stuff like Half-Life Alyx, you can play on the Oculus if you play it on your computer and stream it to your headset.
Yeah, that I've actually done. I bought on Amazon Prime Day, I bought a Wi-Fi extender.
Uh huh.
And so what I do is I have this Wi-Fi extender which has its own SSID, and then the Wi-Fi extender is physically plugged into my desktop with a cat cable. And then I do the AirLink on the Oculus Quest,
Yep.
but when I do the AirLink, it's on the extended network. And so the
Uh,
Quest talks straight to the extender, which is like 2 feet away, which is wired to the PC. And so with that whole setup, the AirLink works amazing.
yes. My problem is my PC does not have a VR capable. It's like the last generation before there was really like VR
Oh,
capable
no.
cards. And then I went to upgrade once I got one, and then found out like, oh yeah, that was a bad timing.
Oh,
So
man.
okay. Anyways, Moss. So Moss is a pretty interesting game, and I actually play it, and we stream the like what I'm seeing or what my kids are seeing to the TV. So we sort of play it as kind of like a family. But it's like a platformer where you're a little mouse like running around and like going through sort of set pieces. And so you as the I don't know how you describe this. Like you're controlling the animal, but your headset is like a sort of third person like set piece view. So you're looking down on like a scene and you're controlling what happens, but then you know you're sort of like once you get to the sort of like exit of that scene, then it sort of like goes to the next scene, kind of like what like point and click adventures used to be,
Oh, okay,
where
okay.
yeah you like go to the edge of the scene and we go to the next one, but each scene is like a set, and then
That
you're
makes
like moving
sense.
through the set. It's like that, but like in VR, and it's just super cool. And I know it's kind of nice, like sometimes moving around and like walking and like all that stuff in VR is really fun, but also can be sort of like you don't want to do that every time. At least I don't. Sometimes it's like it's nice to. It even tells you like sit in a chair and you know just like have the cool visuals.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So is it literally a point and click adventure? Like you're trying to solve little mini puzzles?
I mean, it's a not like a point. It's like a platformer.
Oh, okay, got it,
So,
got it.
so yeah, so trying to yeah, yeah. And there's like puzzles that you need to do and interact with. There's probably a name for that kind of game, but it escapes me what genre that would be.
I think platformer, yeah. I mean, there's Metroidvania where you're have
But
kind of
that
an
involves
open
like you need to
world.
go back to previous ones to like
Yeah,
unlock.
right.
Yeah, it's not like that.
Oh, okay, got it. Maybe it's just a straight platformer. It's like I think they call it a puzzle platformer,
Oh, okay,
where
yeah,
like a
that
regular
seems right.
platformer is like Mario, you're just stepping on things, but this is more like a puzzle platformer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I love those type of games.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to take I mean, talk about vacation.
Yeah, I'm totally ready to take a vacation. We're gonna take a vacation from the show, so I'll catch y'all now. But I think vacations are extremely important, especially now. I think Patrick, you'll probably echo this, but so many people on my team and at my company have maxed out their vacation and are literally just losing vacation days and not taking them. And I think there's this feeling like, well, I work from home, I can, do the laundry while I'm at work. And so, everything is kind of like a mix of, working and not working. And so I don't really need a vacation or maybe I'm going to wait until, COVID is over. But we're really starting to see the effects of that. And so I felt like it's a good time to really talk about why we do vacations, how to take a good vacation, and what are sort of the different kinds of vacations and how you have to act differently when you're planning for one of those.
Yeah, I think company to company vacation policies vary wildly between the United States and not United States, Europe, Asia, like also tons of variation in
Yep.
the expectations and culture around vacations. But yeah, I'll echo what is being said, that like it is important to not burn out, to take time for yourself or your family to do something fun. I think a lot of people are saving it up right now under the current environment. So they just want to do something super fun, and all the fun things seem like you can't do them right now. Like going on international flights or going trips involves like a lot of extra we want to say like getting COVID checked and risks, and people are just not comfortable doing it. So I feel like people are saving up. But I mean, that what I always find, and we don't have this called out to talk about, so I'll just talk about it now. But like sometimes it's you don't think you need a vacation until it's too late. Like by the time you realize like I really need a vacation, then you need to plan it. You're gonna like schedule your time off, and then by the time you get there, you're like way past when you should have done it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we can start it off with this article that I'll link to in the show notes. Talks about the 7 types of rest. And I really found this powerful. I read this a while back and I was able to dig it up. The first type of rest is physical rest. I mean, that's what most people think about. Like, you run a few miles or something, and then, okay, I need to rest. The second type is mental rest. And so, you can imagine this pretty easily too. Like you are you do a chess tournament or something, and then afterwards you're really tired, right?
Debugged my
Um,
program.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you play a human resource machine, and then you need to rest. The third type of rest is sensory rest. This is really important. I feel like, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but I feel like, especially with, little kids, that like, when I have a vacation, I actually, don't. It's the opposite of sensory rest. So in other words, like for me to get sensory rest, I have to go back to work, and that just means, I mean, sensory rest can mean different things to different people. It could mean, bright lights and the computer screen in your face. That's one type of sensory overload. It could be just a lot of people around you all talking and having different conversations at the same time, and you kind of trying to listen to all of them. But all of that stuff can fatigue you on in that dimension. There's creative rest where you might feel compelled to start a new project or invent something new. Like maybe your job right now is to find the next big thing, and so you're just spending all your time trying to figure out like what is the right path, and you can get burnt out in that way. Emotional rest and spiritual rest. So yeah, take a look at this article. But I felt like we can kind of use that to set the stage for you know like with the biggest reason to go on vacation, which is to get that rest so that you can come back with the energy you need to do the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I was mentioning before, like, but sometimes by the time you need that rest, the sort of vacation, which I think is a great opportunity. So some of those kinds of rest you probably should be doing continuously.
Yep.
But
Yep.
a vacation provides a time to step away. I think just put stuff on hold, and I think it's different and taking a vacation when other people are continuing to get the work done and you're stepping away from it, than like when like let's say at Christmas time here in the United States, like maybe your company gives like a week off and everybody has off. I think those two things are actually slightly different, and mentally how like it's good to allow other people to make progress on something and come back and see like the world turns without you versus like everybody
Yep.
takes off and then you come back and everybody's starting up again.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I think one of the sort of anti-patterns to a good vacation is where, you take the time off and you come back and you're 2 weeks behind. Right?
Oh,
And it's like you didn't really take a vacation, you just like procrastinated, right? I mean,
you
it's
just
not a
made your
vacation.
deadlines get closer.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So reasons we should talk a little bit about reasons to not take a vacation. So I mean, a lot of people aren't taking vacations, and so we should talk about what those reasons are because they are real. I mean, they're rational. If people feel like they can lose context, you can miss an opportunity. Maybe there's a plan to have, let's say, an intern, and you took a vacation when the intern applications went out, or you took a vacation in the summer and so your intern wouldn't have a manager, right? So you can miss opportunities to do things that are seasonal or just maybe just serendipitous, but they just happen while you were gone. And you can slip on your deadline, right? If you have a 6-month goal and you take a month off, but you don't change the goal or you don't plan around that, then you still have 6 months of work to do. And so that these are reasons that people will give for not taking a vacation. And those are valid reasons, but I think with the right planning and the right mental model, you can ameliorate a lot of these issues.
Yeah, I mean, talking about planning, I mean, I think there is some stuff you should do. So, making sure that you've handed off responsibility for stuff you're going to do. So, like Jason mentioned, that it's not just like you deferred something for a week and then everything is piling up. Making sure other people are able to help the work that you've done. So, if you're a manager, that means something different than if you're a director. It means something different if you're like a individual contributor. But making sure that people kind of know what you are doing, and that's an important thing in general. I'll say it here too. I think people going on vacation is important for preparing for unexpected absences. So sometimes someone can go on a vacation and you can plan for it, but some people just get sick or have, it would be horrible, but someone could be incapacitated from working for an extended amount of time or even pass away or whatever, right? And as like in the scale of that, obviously like your work stuff isn't that important, but like I mean, making
Hmm.
sure that if someone has to step away unexpectedly, that the team doesn't crumble while they're gone. And part of that taking vacations is sort of like repeatedly making sure the team knows how to cover, or, oh, while you were gone, no one was able to log into that system. So, like, we need you to make sure you have the credentials put somewhere or other people have access. Making sure your code is documented in a way that if someone else has to go in there and debug an issue, that they're not like screaming at you where you can hear them on your vacation. And then also like, making sure that you, as bad as it is, like certain roles and responsibilities, like Jason just mentioned, these reasons why not. Sometimes you need to decide like how available will you be to work while you're on your vacation. And different people decide differently about this. Some people say, if it's an emergency, you can call me. Some people say, hey, let me know about X, Y, or Z, or I'm going to check in each day or every other day. Some people are like, I'm basically dunking my phone in the ocean and like I'll buy a new one when I get back. So, decide up front like what the expectations are with your team about how open you are to being. But it is important to, my thing is like, if you're going on vacation, it really should be, you're not checking sort of your chat rooms, you're not checking your emails every day, but that, maybe if there really is a legitimate reason, someone could reach out to you and get a hold of you. But also, like, do you take your work laptop if you have one or not? Like, if you don't take your work laptop, it may limit how much you could do. And so making sure that like lines are drawn around that with your team, with your manager, and getting all that settled up front.
Yeah, we should talk a little bit here about us personally. My view on this has evolved over the years. Well, there was a time when we worked at a place where when you were on vacation, you didn't have access to anything, and so that kind of made the decision for us. But
Back in the
but
day.
back in my day, but now so starting from the time where we had control over what like how much we wanted to do on vacation, I used to kind of bring my work laptop, bring my work phone, and just be totally plugged in on vacation. And then slowly I've been moving away from that model. And I've gotten to the point now where I don't bring anything and I don't have any connection at all. And what I found for myself is as I did less and less work while I was on vacation, my work quality also went way down because I would have less context. And so I would just make bad decisions and do bad things. And so I realized at some point, I was like, okay, I'm on vacation. And instead of working 100%, I'm doing 10% work that is terrible and like destructive. And so I got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm on vacation, I'm off the grid. And I give, people my like personal phone number if there's something really urgent. But in practice, it's almost never, only a handful of times has it ever come up. And that's kind of where I've evolved to. But how have you evolved, Patrick? Like, where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes over time. My current thing that works for me, I think, is like, here's my phone number. I mean, that's everyone's personal decision, but like, here's my phone number. Look, if something comes up where, and I'm in a position where I, manage some people now, so this is a little bit different. But like, I tell them, like, look, if there's a problem where it would really benefit from me being involved, like, use your discretion to the people on my team or to my manager. Like, call me. I'd rather handle an HR issue or whatever, even if I'm on vacation, than to come back and have it had been an issue for a week, and that being really stressful to a person or the team or to whatever. And so I tell them, like, look, you can text me or you can call me, but I tell them otherwise I'm not going to check my email. So if you send me an email and just maybe he'll check it, I'm not going to. And so I don't check my email. I sign out of our chat app, and if someone needs to SMS me or needs to call me, like, I tell them that they can. They've been respectful of that. Now, that could vary workplace to workplace. And some workplaces, I know people do that and they would get abused, and it would just be constantly being called. And there's a lot more context we should talk about there, but like that's my personal thing. Although I will say that, while we're talking about vacations, there's other kinds of things. Like, if someone were to pass away and you're on bereavement leave or you're on sick leave, for me personally, like, when I'm doing those things, if I'm unable to, like Jason said, do quality work, then I'll be off. But I have a tendency, like, if I'm just sick, I will check in on email or check my chats just in case I could be helpful to someone. I just not up to working a full day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I'm the same way. When I'm sick, I usually work. Just I use the sick day to basically say, look, I can't be 100%, but there are some days, yeah, where I mark myself as sick, but I'm like 99% available. But yeah, for vacation, I had a phase where I was like that, where I basically said, here's my thing. If there's some HR issue, let me know. But then what I found is that while I'm on vacation, I kind of make bad decisions. It's like I'm there on the beach, drinking margaritas or something, and then someone has some HR issue, and then I have to make a decision right then and there. And usually, what happens when you're on vacation is people will they'll only reach you if there's an emergency. And so what you end up with is you end up with just emergencies. And it gives you like a really odd lens through
Oh,
which you view
interesting.
your job because it's just like it's like weekly emergencies, but no context. And so, yeah, and then when I look back on how did I handle those emergencies and like, what actually transpired, I was like, yeah, I probably should have just like not handled it and done nothing until I got back. Um, but yeah, that's very small sample size. I mean, we only go on so many vacations a year, right? So, but yeah, in that very small sample size, I found so I've gone this way. We'll see how it goes. My most recent vacation, which I just got back from, was a week, and I was totally off the grid for that week. And so far so good, but
You
I
still
mean,
have a
if
job and nothing burned down.
came
That's
back, still have a job. I think if I took a long vacation and I came back and something really went wrong and I, just let it go wrong, I think then I'll have that perspective and I'll have the full 360.
I mean, I'll say here too, some people might be thinking like, oh, it must be nice. I mean, I do know there are situations where deciding you want to take a vacation is something you need to negotiate with your, sort of management. And there could be a crunch time or could be something where you really feel you need to take a vacation and you just can't. And look, those situations, do happen. I won't say that there aren't times
Yep.
that I probably didn't take a vacation despite really needing or wanting to because it just wasn't appropriate. But like with everything, I mean, you know, your work life balance is something that varies person to person. If, as Jason and I are alluding to, like, I mean, I think that over time, like how I've approached work life balance, how I've approached these choices has changed. Not just because I'm just at a different place in my life, not because necessarily just work has changed, but I've changed.
Yeah, that's true too.
And so I think you got to make decisions about vacation that are right for you, for your family, for your work. And if you're like, look, I can't take the vacations I really need to, and work won't let me, and you're being honest with yourself, maybe you got to find a new job. But I don't think just because work says, oh, that's not, we deny that vacation, like that's a bad week. Can you take it a few weeks later? I mean, there could be legitimate reasons for that.
Yeah, yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, I think I mean, I've been in sort of research labs the whole time, so I haven't really it's been a long time since I was part of like a product cycle, but yeah, that will affect your when you should take a vacation. And in general, if you have a good read on the ebb and flow of things, it's obviously always best to take a vacation when it's a slow time. But another thing is yeah, when I used to do crew in high school, which people don't know, crew is very similar. It's just rowing a boat. So basically, you all start in the same place in a line, and you all row a boat in a straight line. It's like drag racing with a boat that you row with your hands. And so you might think, well, oh, it's you just everyone just row the boat as fast as they can. But actually, in crew, you'd have these things called power 10, where you'd have 10 like really powerful strokes, and everyone does a power 10 at the same time. That way you don't have one person rowing really hard, encountering all sorts of resistance, and the other people not, right? And so, even in something where it only has one singular goal, which is to go in a straight line as fast as possible, even then you have lulls, right? You have ebbs and flows. So, people have learned that that's sort of you end up getting to the goal faster if you have sort of those slow times and those power times. And so it's the same thing with work. I mean, you're going to be working for who knows, 20, 30 years, 40 years. And so you're going to need to take those breaks so that you can have those like really powerful moments later on. It's all kind of, even if you are totally 100% type A, career oriented, you still like having the right vacation is key to, getting to the finish line as quickly as possible.
What about once you have taken your vacation, which we shouldn't talk about all the awesome places we've all gone, but now we're back. And then, like, when you get back, you got to catch back up. I think sometimes not going on vacation is just the dread of what's going to happen when you get back.
Yeah.
But I think actually the things you would do when you get back, and how, not as like how bad, but how much there is to do, probably is something that tells you like maybe there's stuff to change around, like even in your day to day. So one thing, like you come back and you have hundreds of unread emails you need to go through. I mean, maybe that's your job, maybe that's like something unavoidable. But for me, a lot of those emails are stuff I probably never needed to know about, not really, and I
Yep.
don't need to know about when I get back. So having filters that put those into buckets that I can easily organize and skim through very quickly for things that are like, one thing I don't like about email, or at least how our email is at work, is like things are just intermixed, right? So you're just getting like a personal question, and then you're getting like an automated email, and then you're getting, and it's just the organization isn't good. Having rules or filters or searches you can do where you kind of take care of everything related all at one time, something you need to do to manage the bulk when you get back, but something you probably should do all the time.
Yeah, the nice thing about doing it when you get back from vacation is you have a lot of unread emails. And so there's like an incentive to filter things because you don't have to read them.
Mm.
Whereas if you're reading like emails as they come in, it's like, "Oh, I've already read this. I'm not going to, filter it." But it's like, yeah, if you have like 20 of these, and I don't know, it might depend on the email app you use, but for my job they use Outlook. With Outlook you can like control click several emails and then say filter like this, and it'll come up with like various rules that capture all of those emails without capturing too much. And so I mean you could filter based on who sent it, you can filter based on the subject. And so that's like having a bunch of unread emails gives you like an opportunity to set some rules that are pretty comprehensive.
I mean, I think the other thing, if you're a programmer, which most of you probably are, when you get back, I think it's important to look through the code changes that have happened while you're gone. Catch up on what's changed. If anyone was looking for feedback, or if you have any comments, making sure that you sort of kind of know what the state is of what you're walking back into. If any design documents have come back out, whatever planning has happened, making sure that you talk to key people and sort of figure out what's gone on since you've been there. Another thing is like more recently, especially with the at least that's for my company with work from home, a lot more chats that happen. And so trying to go back to the chats and see like what got talked about, was there anything that I kind of missed that I should follow up on, and just getting through all of that sort of like first day back is important to getting back up to speed.
Yeah. Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, I think yeah, another thing specific to work from home, or maybe even not specific, but especially important when you work from home is getting that transition right. You know, like almost like having some time if you're gonna, let's say, go on a big family trip, then if you're working right up until 10 p.m. before the family trip, and then 5 a.m. the next morning you're in the car like driving cross country, like you're going to be really stressed out, right? And so it's important to have like some type of buffer. Depending on your situation, maybe you need to take an extra day or two off before the vacation, or maybe you do a half day or something, depending on how your circumstances are. But you want to be rested before your vacation starts, and this gets back to that TED talk, right? The vacation is going to exhaust you in some dimensions, and recharge you in others. And so, I mean, and this depends too on the vacation. Like if you have a vacation where you just get to stay home and play video games, that's awesome. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's the best. The staycation is amazing. But if you have a like an adventure vacation, I don't know what you'd call it, but some kind of expedition, if that's your vacation, maybe you're going to go skiing, and it's going to really physically exhaust you or something, right? Like a lot of vacations are going to exhaust you in different ways, and so you actually need to kind of have a vacation from the vacation as well.
You kind of hit on it a little bit on like the types of vacation, like what you're doing, if you're just sitting on the beach or if you're climbing to the top of Kilimanjaro. Like maybe these aren't the same. I think another way that vacations are pretty different is kind of like on the length. And so Jason and I talked about this kind of like briefly before we got started, but like for a really short vacation, we were thinking, a couple of days, probably less than a week, then maybe people just sort of hold off on things. Like if you had something, no one's going to really work it. If they have a question for you, they're going to just kind of wait till you get back. That sort of like short vacation. And it's good to take those sometimes. You can do fun stuff in just a couple of days for yourself personally. But from a work perspective, that doesn't really serve the same sort of role as like taking a full like 1 to 2 weeks. Then you need people to like fill in for you. Your work has to kind of like be taken over.
Yep.
I guess it depends on the speed of stuff you're going and your job situation. But like at that point too, I think that's useful for your organization. Also, there's something just like Jason was talking about the kinds of rest, like the length of rest. It takes a day or two when you're in a place just to like realize you don't have to do work the next day. And then like the day, for me at least, like the day before I go back, I'm kind of like prepping myself mentally. So if you're only going on 1 to 3 days, you never fully check out. But once you get up to like 2 weeks, especially, you have a real opportunity to check out and really focus on other things.
Yeah, I mean, once you start hitting the 1 to 2 weeks, then that's the time when people who depend on you are just not going to tolerate. I mean, most projects can't be stalled for 2 weeks, and so you're going to need to find some kind of deputy, right? Like you're going to need to find somebody who can be your second in command for that particular task, right? If you are the expert on the data processing pipeline for your team, and you're gone for 2 weeks, like someone else is going to have to be able to fix problems with the data processing pipeline. And so, um, before you can really take a 2 week vacation, like there needs to be redundancy. So that's like a prerequisite. Otherwise, you're not going to really be able to take a vacation. You're going to have to be on call in some way, shape, or form. And so, yeah, you know, it's kind of nice, like forcing yourself to take a 2 week vacation is also forcing yourself to train other people. And some people might say, well, training other people just takes extra time, and that person is not indebted to it, right? But it's going to get another person looking at this system, and maybe even when you get back, that person can continue helping you. It's going to help build your sense of direction as an engineer. So it's got a lot of positives beyond just being able to let you take a break.
And then if you could be so lucky as to be off for a month or more, sometimes I guess you stretch that and you call it a sabbatical. Then I think, that's the time when there really has to be a replacement for you. It's not that you are not going to be able to come back to that work, but just there are goals that you were doing which will be accomplished by other people. There will be changes potentially to your organization, to whatever, and when you come back, you really have been away. And I think there's a certain value. So I've never been able to do this while working at a place, but between jobs, I have taken 3 weeks off, 4 weeks off before. And I guess when I did, my work gave me enough parental leave where I was able to take sort of 4 weeks off in one go when I had one of my children. And I think there you get a true, you know, I'm away from work. I have to not just be away from work and doing something. I need to figure out like how to organize my non-work life. Like, you got to have structure to your time away. You got to have things to do. You get a non-work routine. And I think that's a really like nice way to get perspective on a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, once you're gone for, a month, then it's not just about maintaining your responsibilities, but someone else is going to have to advance them. Like you can't almost nothing can just sit still for a month. And so yeah, you're going to have to get replaced. And so yeah, and then when you come back after being gone for several months, then that's a really interesting feeling because you've replaced yourself. And so when you come back, it's like, do you displace those people or do you find something else to do? I mean, there's a lot of questions there. Those are ultimately very, very rewarding vacations when you can take a really long time. And I mean, now we're getting to the point, as I was saying, with so many people maxing out their PTO. And I don't remember what the max is. I want to say it is 10 weeks, I think.
I think it varies workplace to workplace. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's definitely true. But I think where I work, it's 10 weeks or maybe 10 and a half or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, if you can, I mean, there's plenty of people who can take, 2.5 months off. And so, yeah, with that, if someone does that, they could come back and their team could be totally different. And so, which again is not a bad thing at all. What is your take on that? So let's say you have, I mean, parental leave is a bit different, right? But let's say you have just a huge bank of PTO. Would you break it up and take, a week every month, or would you take a huge chunk of it at once? What would you do?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I guess it kind of depends. Like, I do not think I would take. I don't know personally. Whatever. I guess it's true for like me financially, but as well as like I just don't having like a zero balance doesn't do it for me. So I don't think I would take it all, but I definitely would try to take like a vacation to maybe another country or to something or do some like project that I really wanted to focus on and do and really take a good chunk of it off at one time. I don't think I would go down to zero. I'd probably go down. I like having, for my situation, I like having, like a week available so that like I could always take a couple days and then not be at zero and then take a couple days again. Right. So I
Yep,
like
yep.
going down to no more than sort of like 1 week in the like not having less than a week left. So if I had 10 weeks, I'm gonna fantasize. If I had 10 weeks off, I think I would take at least a 6 week chunk and do something amazing.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think, my last big vacation was, I did get a month sabbatical through work. And the way it was set up, you had to take the whole month at once. You weren't given an option. And so it was really nice. I mean, we drove cross country, but it definitely was weird coming back. Actually, when I came back, there was a reorg. So when I came back, the organization looked totally different. So it is a bit jarring, but yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think so. Actually, one thing to mention is neither one of us have maxed out our PTO, and so
I wish.
number one piece of advice is to not do that, and to please take your vacation for all these reasons we talked about. But if for some reason I ended up with 10 weeks of PTO, yeah, I would probably take probably 2 months, and yeah, same kind of thing. Just focus or find something cool to do, or take an international trip or something.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, folks out there, if you have any vacation tips, we can make it the intro topic of the next show. So give us your feedback on what you think constitutes a good vacation. vacation horror stories, pretty much anything. You can send an email to programmingthrowdown@gmail.com. And we always appreciate reading really cool stories. I got an email just to kind of close this out. I got an email regarding a number of emails, but one of them regarding our hash maps episode that just went live. And there's a really amazing article. I'll have to go back and find it for next week, for next show, about how Google used like brute force to kind of break some hashing. So I'll share that to everybody. But I really appreciate that and all the other emails. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
All right, see you next time.
Music by Eric Arndauer.
Programming Throwdown is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 2.0 license. You're free to share, copy, distribute, transmit the work, to remix and adapt the work, but you must provide attribution to Patrick and I, and share alike in kind.